Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Slooth Crime Stories. Once upon a time, there was a boy who was sleeping in his bedroom on the second floor of his house, just like any other day. In the early hours of the morning, he was suddenly awakened by his father, who told him that something might be happening in the house, and they needed to get up immediately and go to the living room on the first floor to call the police. Little did they know, a series of events unfolded as soon as they reached downstairs. The next morning, the boy woke up in the first floor bathroom and found the house in a chaotic state, with his parents nowhere to be found. Where did they go? Who targeted this family? Let me tell you the rest of the story. The story took place in Aichi Prefecture, which belongs to the central part of Japan and is part of the Nagoya metropolitan area. In the central part of Aichi Prefecture is South City. This is the southern part of the ancient Mikawa province's Hekinan district, hence its name, and it is mainly based on the automotive industry, hardware industry, and food industry. About 70,000 people live here. The protagonist of the story is Ma Bin, who is still the manager of a blog store. A blog is a kind of pinball machine with entertainment and gambling characteristics, which is very common in Japan. Every holiday I pass by the store and it is always crowded. The legal industry is widely popular, and Ma Binginan's wife Li Mei is a 36-year-old housewife. They have two children, an 8-year-old son named Yishu, who is in the 3rd grade, and a 6-year-old son named Gichin, who is in the 1st grade. The family resides in a 2-story house called Bitan style of Yu Yun Ding. Their living arrangement consists of a living room, kitchen and a bedroom on the first floor, where Ma Binginan and Li Mei sleep. The second floor is occupied by their two sons, and there's also a small attic on top of the house. Ma Bin's car shop business thrives, requiring him to work late into the night. Despite his long hours, his income is substantial. During his free time, he enjoys taking his family on trips across the country. Their comfortable lifestyle lacks any financial worries. However, they never anticipated the arrival of misfortune. On June 29, 1998, a Monday at 2 o'clock in the morning, Yishu, the eldest son, was abruptly awakened in his second-floor bedroom. To his surprise, his father stood before him, causing his artistic vision to blur. The other party said anxiously, "Your mother seems to have passed away, hurry up and call, you have to call the police." The 8-year-old Art felt puzzled when he heard this, but his father seemed to have no time to explain, and he pulled Yishu downstairs. The phone was waiting for someone in the living room on the first floor. As soon as they got downstairs, two strange men rushed out of the bedroom on the first floor, and then subdued the father and son. Then another man came out of the bathroom on the first floor and took Yishu into the bathroom. Because there was no light in the house and it was late at night, the father and son could not see the faces of the three men. Yishu was very scared and fainted. Time came to the morning. Yishu gradually woke up. He found himself still in the bathroom on the first floor. After going out, every corner of his home was in a mess, and various items were scattered all over the floor. He searched the whole house, but there was no trace of his parents. However, his younger brother, 6-year-old Gichin, was still sleeping in his own room. Yishu woke up his brother and went downstairs to call a relative for help. After learning about it, he immediately notified the police. After receiving the alarm, the police arrived at the scene quickly and saw that the first floor of the house was very chaotic, with obvious signs of fighting. A wallet was found at the scene, but the cash inside had disappeared, and a safe in the house was missing. There was an uncleared plate on the dining table on the first floor, with some leftover tripe shells on it. In addition, the man's car was also missing, and no fingerprints of the suspect were found in the house. The police questioned the eldest son Yishu, who said that on the evening before the incident, he was resting in his bedroom on the second floor, and then he was awakened by the sound of talking downstairs, so he got up and went downstairs to see who it was. After opening the door, he heard his mother and several strange men talking upstairs, and he thought it was his father who came home from work with a few colleagues, so he didn't go downstairs to check, and then went back to bed to sleep. At midnight, he was suddenly awakened by his father, and they wanted to go downstairs to call the police. After going downstairs, Yishu saw his mother lying on the living room floor, and then a few people came out of nowhere and attacked him and his father. He fainted with fright and didn't wake up until the next morning. Shortly after contacting his relatives, the police arrived at the scene. After initially understanding the situation of the parties involved, the police also questioned the neighbors nearby. One neighbor said that at 4:30 p.m. on the day before the incident, he had seen 3 men wandering around. They looked sneaky and didn't know what they were doing. Then he saw the 3 men enter Ma Bin's home. He thought they were Ma Bin's friends, so he didn't pay much attention. It is worth noting that there are some lakes near Ma Bin's home, and the weather was very good on the afternoon of the day before the incident. There were many anglers fishing nearby. Some sources said that there were many people who came to fish that afternoon, but they could only see a man holding a fishing rod and a bucket wandering around the nearby street, but they never fished by the lake, which looked a bit strange. A colleague of Ma Bin said that on the afternoon of the day before the incident, when Ma Bin came to work, he received a phone call from his wife, who seemed to say, there was someone visiting at home, so he wanted to ask Ma Bin, what time do you get off work? Baby, don't you remember if you come to my home as a guest, so let your wife entertain them first. Since it was a weekend, the guest shop business was very good, and Ma Bi couldn't get away. He was busy until midnight before returning home. Based on the above testimony, the police speculated that this case might be a premeditated burglary, but they did not rule out the possibility of acquaintances committing the crime. The suspects took away Ma Bin, Yi Han and his wife Lin Wei after looting their belongings. 5 days later, the police received a phone call. Someone said that they found a white Lexus car on a street in Gaobeidian City, Anning, Aichi Prefecture. The car was unfamiliar, not a local car, and it had been parked there for several days. It looked very strange and wanted the police to deal with it. According to the license plate number, the police found that the car was the one that was lost from Ma Bin's home 5 days ago. Investigators immediately rushed to the location of the car in Gaobeidian City. They found Ma Bin's stolen safe on the back seat of the car. The box had been pried open and the belongings inside were gone. Then, the investigators opened the trunk of the car and they were horrified to find Ma Bin and his wife Lin Wei lying inside. The two had no obvious external injuries, but they had tear marks on their necks and had no signs of life. Upon examination, the two died of suffocation and were killed 5 days ago. On the night of the incident, the police found some leftover edamame shells on the dining table on the first floor of the house, but no edamame digest was detected in the hands of the two. Therefore, these edamame may have been eaten by the suspects. Based on this clue, the laboratory successfully extracted the DNA of an unknown male from the edamame river, but there was no match for this DNA in the existing database. According to the testimony of the eldest son Yishu and other witnesses, there were at least 3 suspects, but the police only extracted the DNA of one male. Then they tried to find more clues from the white Lexus car, but the car seemed to have been cleaned and there was no new discovery. Based on the currently known clues, the police roughly speculated about the movements of that night. The crime involving Ma Bin and his wife Lin Wei was meticulously planned by the suspects. They secretly observed their home before gaining Lin Wei's trust and entering the house. To deceive Ma Bin, they called his office pretending to be guests, and learned his expected return time. Taking advantage of Lin Wei's hospitality, they entertained her with edamame. At midnight when Ma Bin arrived home, he discovered his wife's lifeless body on the floor. Concerned for the safety of their 2 sleeping children upstairs, Ma Bin went to check on them. He woke up his eldest son Yishu, and intended to call the police together. Unbeknownst to them, the suspects had been lying in wait on the first floor, and launched a surprise attack when the father and son descended. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the suspects may have been acquaintances or gained Lin Wei's trust through other means. Despite investigating their personal relationships, the police found no evidence of a grudge against the couple. The suspect's plan was executed with precision. The police checked a total of 2,000 people who were fishing nearby and who might have contact with the couple that day, but found no one who matched the suspect's DNA. Then, after years of investigation, the police still failed to find the suspect. This case became a cold case. Time came to 9 years after the incident, when another case occurred. On Friday, August 24, 2007, there was a 31-year-old woman named Isoyatori. Her father died when she was young, and then she lived with her mother in Nagoya. She had a very deep relationship with her mother and had always dreamed of buying her mother a house of her own. She saved up 8 million yen by living frugally at the age of 31, which was enough to buy a house in the local area. Isoyatori had always wanted to change jobs, and now she had enough money, plus her boyfriend's support, she decided to quit. Today was her last day at work. That night her colleagues held a farewell party for her. At 11 p.m., the farewell party ended and everyone went home. Isoyatori's home was nearby, just less than 100 meters away. After her colleagues left, she walked home alone. During this time, a car came to her side. The driver asked if he could talk to her, and he seemed like a kind person. She stopped and answered his questions. At this moment, 2 men suddenly came down from the back seat of the car. They forcibly pulled her into the car and then disappeared. The next day at 1 p.m., Nagoya Police Station received a call. The caller was a man who claimed that he had kidnapped a woman, robbed her of her money, and buried her in Ruili City nearby. Then, the man voluntarily came to the police station and surrendered. His name was Kenji Kawagishi, 40 years old, living in Ishikawa Prefecture. He worked for a security company after graduating from high school. He had a child after getting married. In order to buy a house for his family, he borrowed a lot of money, but he spent it lavishly and could not repay the mortgage. He was forced to give up his house. He also had domestic violence behavior. His wife could not bear it and divorced him. The custody of the child was also obtained by his wife. After that, Kenji Kawagishi became poor and homeless. He found a job as a construction site security guard and a part-time truck driver. He slept in the truck every day, but he felt that his income was too low and he could not get out of it. His life had become an arduous struggle. 8 days ago, he resorted to posting a message on an illicit website, seeking employment opportunities near Nagoya. A man named Keith, also known as KT, responded. Keith had just been released from prison and was eager to work in the Tokai area, encompassing Aichi, Gifu, Mie, and Shizuoka prefectures. KT, whose real name was Kanda, was 36 years old and had a troubled past. His parents divorced when he was young, leaving him in the care of his volatile and abusive father. Having developed a habit of theft since childhood, Kanda eventually joined a gang and engaged in criminal activities. After his recent release from prison, he took up a low-paying job as a newspaper promoter, but the income proved insufficient. Desperate for a big score, Kanda sought a suitable accomplice for a major robbery, yet struggled to find one. Shortly after his post resurfaced, another internet user named Hori, 32 years old and a school dropout, replied. Hori had recently lost his job and exhausted his savings, making robbery an enticing prospect. After seeing this post, Kenji Kawagishi contacted the passenger who was forbidden to contact by email and agreed to meet with 3 netizens named Miura at a restaurant in Nagoya. 4 days later, the 4 met and discussed how to make money. Kumar suggested that they could go to a karaoke bar in Nagoya, where there was a lot of people and they had a lot of money on them. They could find their target there. The 4 decided to give it a try. So they bought a series of tools for the crime and went to the karaoke bar to look for their target. They soon locked on a man. He had just walked out of the shop, but they looked at each other and no one dared to make the first move. They followed the man until he returned home, but they did not do anything. the operation failed. Then they planned to go to a house to steal. After the screening, they targeted a relatively wealthy family, but after sneaking into the house, they found that the family had a dog. The dog barked incessantly at them, scaring them away. The operation failed again. It was late at night, and the two operations had consumed a lot of their physical strength. They decided to go home and rest first. Early the next morning, the four met again. Hori, Q, said that he knew a pub owner. His shop must have a lot of money, so they went to the pub. But the business was too good that day, and the shop was full of customers. They couldn't do anything. They had to leave, but they didn't want to waste their trip. They decided to wait for the owner to close the shop and go home, and then act on the way home. At 11 p.m., the owner finally closed the door and prepared to go home. The four followed him carefully. There were many surveillance cameras along the way. There were also a few sporadic pedestrians passing by from time to time. The four still didn't find a chance to make a move. The pub owner returned home safely. The operation failed again. 2 days later, the four met again. Kenji Kawagishi said that they could go to a company where he used to work. He was very familiar with the environment of that company. It was near the end of the month, which was when the company issued new books. There must be a lot of cash in the company's safe, don't cry all day long. Hori, Ku, said that such companies often have security guards on duty, and it was too risky to break in rashly. But Kenji Kawagishi insisted on his idea. He persuaded Hori, Ku. At midnight, the two went to the company. They broke the glass of the company and broke in. They searched separately in the office, but they couldn't find the safe for a long time. They made a lot of noise and attracted the patrol security guard. Kenji Kawagishi took advantage of his familiarity with the terrain and found a passage to escape by himself, while Kumar was left in the office. At this critical moment, Hori, Ku, had no choice but to force his way out. But there were monitors everywhere in the office, and he was also photographed. Although Hori, Ku, escaped successfully later, he knew clearly that his identity had been exposed and the police would catch him sooner or later. He had no choice but to go to the police station and surrender voluntarily. Hori, Ku, told the police about the other three accomplices, but they didn't use their real names. Therefore, although the police knew that there were other people involved in the crime, they couldn't find them in a short time. The following day, the remaining three accomplices reconvened. Hori, desperate for money, expressed an urgent need to acquire 300,000 yen within the week. Determined, they embarked on their plan. That night, Kenji Kawagishi drove aimlessly, scouring the roads for potential targets, with Hori positioned in the back seat. The early evening proved futile as the streets bustled with pedestrians. However, as night fell, they reached Freedom Hill near Nagoya, a densely populated area. With most residents having retreated indoors, only a few occasional passers-by remained. It didn't take long for them to fixate on Isoyatori Hui, who had just attended a farewell gathering and was making her way home. Under the pretense of seeking directions, they lured her into their car. Proceeding to an outdoor parking lot in Aichi Prefecture, they coerced Isoyatori Hui into surrendering 62,000 yen in cash and 2 bank cards. Pressuring her for the card passwords, she vehemently maintained that the funds were rightfully hers. She said that the money she was going to buy a house with could not be handed over. But the robbers were not easy to deal with. They took advantage of the situation and wanted to teach her a lesson. She finally gave a password, 2960. After getting the password, the three were afraid that Isoyatori would call the police, so they locked her in a car and abandoned her in a forest where her father was a teacher. Later, the three divided the money and cleaned up the traces in the car. They took the bank card to the bank and wanted to withdraw cash, but found that the password she gave was wrong. The three separated again and agreed to act again next time. Because of the murder, Kenji Kawagishi was very scared after this crime. He couldn't sleep all night, worried that the police would catch him. After struggling for a while in his heart, he finally couldn't bear it. The next day, he went to the police station and surrendered voluntarily. Under his confession, the other two were also arrested. The police found Kinoshita's body in a forest in Ruili City under the guidance of the three suspects. After an autopsy, the forensic doctor examined her and found that she had many injuries on her body and died of suffocation. After the trial was over, the prosecution was not satisfied with the result and continued to appeal. Finally, the Tokyo Supreme Court upheld the second trial verdict. After the trial was over, Hori, Q, and the other two were sent to prison to serve their sentences. According to the procedure, the police extracted their DNA and entered it into the database. Unexpectedly, the DNA database issued a warning. It turned out that Hori, Q's DNA matched the suspect's DNA in a case of a couple who were killed by a personal computer in 1998. The police immediately interrogated Hori, Q. In the end, he admitted that he was responsible for that case. The time went back to May 1998, when Hori, Q, lived in Binan City and had just bought a car. To repay the car loan, he tried to rob a karaoke bar. The manager of that shop was Martinelli. But Hori, Q, found it very difficult to do it alone. So he found a friend. One night they prepared tools and went to the karaoke bar. They found that there were several other employees besides the manager in the shop, and the success rate of the robbery was very low, so they gave up the action. After a period of preparation, they found a new accomplice to join them. During that time, they successfully learned the home address of the manager Marion. They thought there must be valuable things in the manager's house. On June 28, 1998, Sunday at 4:30 p.m., the criminals drove to Marion's house. They brought tools and some fishing gear with them. They had already checked the place and knew that there were many anglers nearby. Their purpose of fishing was to make others think that they were also fishing, so as not to arouse suspicion. The three put on gloves and went to Marion's door. The door was not closed. The three entered the house without any effort. There were his wife Satomi and two children in the house. At that time, the children were in the bedroom on the second floor. Satomi was very scared when she saw strangers breaking in and shouting for help, but no one heard her cry. She quickly covered Satomi's mouth. She explained that they were Martinelli's friends, and met him at a Mexican restaurant. Now they were being chased by gangsters and needed to hide here for a while. Satomi believed her words. Based on Hori's confession, the police found the other two accomplices involved in the crime that year. They were Kandaji and Hori Kasuke. They were arrested and brought to justice. In December 2015, the Nagoya High Court gave its verdict on the case. Hori, Kandaji, and Hori Kasuke were found guilty of intentional homicide. Kurakuma received a life sentence for good behavior, while Hori was sentenced to death for committing multiple crimes. Hori appealed the decision, but the Tokyo Supreme Court upheld the death sentence. Before 2005, Japanese law stated that the prosecution period for major criminal cases was 15 years. Once this time limit expired, the prosecution could no longer charge the suspect. The unsolved case was finally solved after being on hold for 14 years. It shows that justice prevails, there are consequences for actions, and life operates in cycles. We should avoid doing evil.
Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications.